Hey everybody, welcome to the Age Group Triathlon podcast. My name is Simon Olney, I'm a professional triathlon coach, and in this week's episode I'm going to be sharing with you some hard truths from the world of triathlon. Now, when we are all attracted to the sport of triathlon, when we see these motivational videos of people crossing Ironman finish lines, when we read interviews that pluck on the heartstrings about what people have achieved via triathlon, and you see this very glossy side of the sport. You see interviews with professional athletes and they talk all about, the training they've been doing, all the work that they do. And we're all sold this dream. And you know what? In many ways, training and competing for triathlon, it is a dream. It's a real privilege. It's something that we are so lucky to be able to do. But there are also some really hard truths about triathlon, things that people don't really talk about. Some of the bad and the ugly of the sport. And in this week's episode, I'm going to touch on a few of these, but at the end I'm going to also have some hidden truths, which I believe are benefits of the sport that a lot of people don't really touch on, don't really talk about. So I don't want it to be too negative. But I do want to share with you some of the hard truths, so that people who are new to the sport, sort of understand, what comes. But also for those of you who may be struggling with some of these areas of sport, you can reassure yourself, you know what? It's not just me. This is normal. It's not something that I'm doing wrong. It's just part of the sport. And we need to find a way to keep moving forward with that. Now, the first hard truth is that money can make you faster. And this is something that, especially in triathlon, on the bike, it turns into a bit of an arms race. Now, if you are just getting stuck into the sport, if you are sort of moving through the distances, if you're not really focused on any sort of major performance goals, this doesn't really apply that much. But if you are looking to podium at events, if you are looking to qualify for world championships, then the athlete who can afford a coach, who can afford a super top-end triathlon bike, a really advanced aerodynamic tri-suit, top-end wetsuit, aero helmet, super shoes, they are going to have an advantage over someone who's trying to get it all done on a budget and a wing and a prayer. The training that somebody does, the resilience that they have, all of this, it still plays an enormous part. But if you were to take two identical athletes, one who has a budget of, say, sort of 10 grand a year that they spend on the triathlon, and somebody who is sort of trying to make it all work on sort of a grand, maybe, in a year. The athlete who has 10 times the budget, they're not going to go 10 times as fast, don't get me wrong, but they are going to have an advantage. They're going to have that little heads up. And if you find yourself sort of adrift of the field in your training and you wonder how is it that these people up the road, how is it they can finish 5-10 minutes faster than me? I thought I absolutely nailed that race. What is it that they are doing differently? How can I close that gap? Unfortunately, it's a hard truth of triathlon. If somebody can afford all the very best kit and to hire the best coaches, they are going to have an advantage. In other sports, this is less pronounced. Running and swimming, jump out. Also, sort of a lot of team sports, racket sports, and that there's only so far that money will get you. But in triathlon, we have to be honest with ourselves. If we are looking at somebody who is just on a very entry-level bike, as opposed to somebody whose bike looks like a spaceship and goes like a rocket with a disc wheel on it, and the best tyres and all of that, this is going to have a very significant impact on our performance. And the longer the event is, the greater this disparity. Over the sprint distance, I may only end up actually being about 5 minutes behind the very best in the world. When you look at Ironman, it's hours. And that's something to do with my strengths and my weaknesses and as an individual. But as we move up to 70.3 and Ironman, this financial disparity becomes all the greater, and we'd be lying to ourselves if we tried to persuade ourselves otherwise. But on the flip side, money cannot buy you a finish. And this is something that I've been exposed to a fair bit as a coach. Now, when I was in London, my website ranked very highly. If you typed in Triathlon Coach London into Google, I think I was the second result. So I got quite, I did really well, especially over the COVID period when a lot of people had a lot of money. from furlough and less expenses and the like. But a lot of people who hired me who had, a decent bit of money, sort of living and working in London, and they thought that by working with me, or I should say by hiring me, that would kind of buy them a finish. They see these people who've got these Ironman finisher medals, this money can't buy experience, and they think that simply by getting the most expensive bike and by hiring a highly qualified and experienced coach, that is going to help them get they can almost sort of buy the medal with that. But that's not the case. You still have to put in a lot of work. And sure, if you were to hire me, get a fantastic bike, if you really were to throw the kitchen sink at your product, get my highest level of coaching, get all the equipment, all the nutrition, the supplements, really throw money at this, you still need to put in as much work as those people who are doing it all on a wing and a prayer. Because the difference, it's not just referring to Ironman, any triathlon. All of these areas help, having somebody who can sort of take care of your nutrition, write your training plan, give you feedback, get all the best equipment. These are going to have an effect on your finish time, but we are talking about a minute or two over the sprint distance. We relative to somebody who is equally talented, has done the same levels of training. We are looking at really small differences. Now, these small differences, they can be incredibly impactful. If you imagine somebody got all the gear and they had the perfect approach, as opposed to somebody who's very dedicated and self-coached, who was just doing it on cheaper equipment. That person who's thrown an enormous budget at their training, they may only finish a minute or two ahead of them. But if you imagine if you went to go across the finish line, an official stopped you and said, wait, you've got to serve you 2-minute penalty, and you stand at the finish line and watch people run past you for 2 minutes, that's going to feel like an age. So this is impactful, but if you do want to actually really get fast, you need to do the training, you need to do the work, you need to put in the weeks, the months, the years of training to achieve what it is that you want to. Especially if we start looking at people who want to go to world championship events, if people want to really start competing, there's a huge level of sacrifice, there's a huge level of dedication, fitness, resilience. All of this is required. And just by hiring a coach and getting yourself a fancy bike, okay, that's not going to help you on race day. All that could end up is it could mean that you end up missing the bike cutoff. If you don't listen to that coach, or you don't really engage with that coach, you just let them write a training plan without really giving any feedback. If you are simply focused on, sort of spending all the time at the cafe stops. Oh yes, I know, but it's a long ride, so I'm going to have 2 or 3 coffee stops. Well, you don't have those. There's a lot of people in Richmond Park in London who we call them the peacocks. They'll go to bike shops in the area. There are a lot of very nice bike shops, one of which I used to work for, and they buy the expensive kit. And they'll spend 12 grand on a bike, but they won't actually really cycle very far or very fast. They'd much rather sit around talking about cycling and their bike and their kit and that, rather than actually going out and doing the hard work. And there is absolutely no replacement for hard work, for grit, determination. If you want to do well in triathlon, you've got to get out there. You've got to train hard. Money isn't going to get you that far on its own. Something else that's a hard truth is that effective triathlon training, it's a bit of a grind. Now, you could go for the approach of, I'm going to go to all of these club training sessions, I'm going to go out and I'm going to attack all of these KOMs on my weekend ride, and you could have, a very dare I say, chaotic approach to your triathlon training. You could train with loads of groups of people, go out with a variety of training partners, really go and approach this from an angle of, I just want to have fun and have as much variety as I can. And you know what? There is nothing wrong with that. I don't want you to think that you're doing it wrong if that's your approach to triathlon. That's how I approached it in the first few years. But if you really want to get fast, if you see people who are absolutely nuking you on the course, if you feel that you've hit a bit of a plateau and you're not improving, or you feel that you're just not ready to take on a half Ironman or an Ironman, that you could never dream of getting onto the podium, if these are things you want to achieve, then you need to start training properly, rather than in a sort of a chaotic fashion, in a random fashion, sort of doing what it is that you feel like. Maybe skipping your runs if it's raining hard. If you do want to actually really achieve your potential, you need to embrace the sort of like, I guess, like monotony in some cases of just these long, easy sessions. You need to embrace doing the same swim sets, sort of 4 or 5 times a year, maybe more. If you depending on how many times a week it is that you're swimming, you listen to a lot of top triathletes, and they talk about their favourite swim sets they go back to time and time again because they make them faster. And now the training will change over the year. We will include different types of intervals at different times of the year. We'll start doing race-specific sessions. We'll have more sort of strength focus in the gym throughout the year. It is going to wax and it's going to wane. But you're going to have to accept that for a lot of people, there's going to be a long ride and a long run, probably most weeks on the weekend or otherwise if you work less predictable shifts. And that it's going to be a case of, in the week, 1 or 2 interval sessions. And then the rest of the time, it's going to be relatively chill, steady. There may be some intervals, but they're be like zone 2 intervals. We're only actually really going to go hard like twice a week in most cases. Again, depending on the distance, depending on the athlete, it may be a bit more. But you have to accept that if you actually really want to get fast, you want to be fresh for those interval sessions. And the way you get fresh for those interval sessions is making sure you take it steady on the other days. And this takes a real kind of mindset shift to go, you know what, I just need to embrace this grind. I need to embrace this routine to be able to hit all of these consistent weeks like this, because that is how you achieve excellence. If you listen to a lot of professional triathletes talk, they reference sort of the grind, they reference the routine. It's what they do because it works. And again, if you want to have a more sort of chaotic, a more random approach to your training, that's absolutely fine. Knock yourself out. But if you really want to get fast, then you are going to need to embrace this more sort of monotonous routine sense of training in a lot of cases, because it just works. I hate to break it to you guys, but some triathletes are dicks. And we have a sense, this tribal sort of instinct to want to band together with people who we share things in common with. Okay, it's only natural. And if we meet another triathlete, if we get chatting to people who we train with, or bump out and about, we're immediately going to want to form these bonds of kinship. But you have to accept that some of them, they're just assholes. They're just jerks. And this can be quite hard to accept because so many triathletes are lovely, they're positive, you can have a really good chat with them. It's one of the reasons that I do the job that I do in the sport, because I really like most triathletes. But there's always going to be some exceptions. There's always going to be some that look down on you, that kick up a bit of a fuss, they're elitist. Things as simple as, they'll just blow through red lights on a ride. They will be aggressive in the pool, and they think they're all that in a bag of chips because they went to Kona once, or they completed one Ironman, so they're the dog's bollocks now. Some people, they're just, if some people are, in all walks of life, they are just unpleasant. And sure, I'd say it's only probably like 1 in 100 triathletes who I meet who I really don't get on with, but you are going to encounter them. And you don't need to persuade yourself that actually they must be good people because they're triathletes like me. Like, some of them, they're just assholes, and we need to accept that. It's just a fact of life. As a triathlete, you're going to spend a lot of time feeling quite tired, run down, and sore. Now, this should not be a perpetual state of being. Okay, if you are constantly exhausted, if your body just isn't recovering, that is an issue with your recovery, and you need to address that. You need to either lower the volume, look at your nutrition, your sleep, whatever it is. However, we are going to spend quite a lot of time waking up in the morning, and we're not going to jump out of bed and go, I cannot wait to do my 3 hour ride this morning. A lot of time we're going to wake up, we're going to feel yesterday's run in the legs, we're going to feel lethargic, the alarm goes off, and we know we've got to get ourselves out of bed and we need to get ourselves onto that bike. And it can be a battle. You need to remind yourself why it is that you're doing it. If you have a busy family life and you need to get up at like 4:30, 5 on the weekends to get your long rides in, that is going to be a struggle. But I tell you what, when you drag yourself out of that bed, go downstairs, make yourself your coffee, have something to eat, as soon as you roll out of that door on that bike, you're going to feel so glad that you're out there. And yes, you will feel maybe a bit flat, you'll feel a bit tired. But as you get out there, as it starts to warm up, as it starts to get lighter, and you're out there just getting the work done while everybody else is asleep, you're going to get back and you're going to feel amazing. But that's not to say that you're not going to feel tired. You're not going to sort of feel run down. And this, again, different times of the year, it's going to change. Now, as I'm recording this in early May, you are going to sort of be feeling probably more tired than I'd expect somebody to feel in sort of November, December time, when we really are foot off the gas, recovery, laying down the foundations. As we get closer to our race, we are going to be feeling more tired, we are going to be working harder, fitting more volume in, so it does change throughout the year. But I really want you to get away from the idea of thinking, I just need to sort of recover, I need to wait until my legs have recovered from the run before I do another session. You really do need to get used to the idea of, look, you're going to have to train when you're unmotivated, when you're tired, and you're just going to have to make it work. Speaking of motivation, it's going to wax and it's going to wane over the weeks, over the months, over the years, over the decades. I go through some periods where my motivation, both as a coach and an athlete, is really high. Okay, it could be that I've seen a video, I've done something, I've had a race that I'm happy with, and I am going to be feeling really good, really motivated, getting some really good sessions in. And, I'm feeling really invested and really going the extra mile with my athletes. Other times, there are other things that are going on in my life, and I can't just give as much of myself as I can at other times. It could be that there's been a loss in the family. It could be that, one of my friends is going through, a really hard time. Just going through a divorce or something like that. And my mind is just sort of temporarily, it's elsewhere. And that's not to say that I'll necessarily miss sessions, although sometimes that does have to happen. But most of the time, it's just that I'm not quite as motivated, I'm not quite as excited to get out there and to put in the sessions as I am at other times. And this is normal, this is natural. Now, luckily, as amateurs, it doesn't make an enormous difference. I think it could be much harder for professional triathletes when they, it's their job to get up and to train, often sort of 2 or 3 times a day. And if that's just the last thing they want to do because something else has happened, they just have to find a way to make it work. Whereas for us, where we are at the moment as amateurs, it's not quite as critical. But again, if we want to achieve our goals, if we don't want to find ourselves, behind where we want to be on race day, we just have to separate between motivation and discipline, because motivation only gets you so far. And I think times that I have felt really motivated, it's rare that lasts for more than about 6 weeks, after which it does start to fall off a little bit. So be prepared for this. Understand that there are times when your motivation is going to be really high. There are times where the motivation isn't going to be there. That doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong with you as an individual. It just means you have to work through this, reframe things in your mind, maybe mix up your training a little bit if it has just got a little too monotonous. If you do need to change things around a bit, then lean into that, experiment, and just, find what it takes to get yourself motivated again. But don't feel that you're a failure if you lose that real kind of enthusiasm for all things triathlon. That does wax and it does wane over time. If you do triathlon for long enough, you're going to have a bit of a panic attack in the water, you're going to get kicked at a race start, you're going to crash your bike, you're going to pick up a running injury. These things, as much as we can try, we should do everything we can to minimise the chances of these things happening. They happen to everyone. Again, if you are only running once or twice a week, you may not be able, may be able to get away without picking up a running injury. But for the most part, these are just parts of racing. These are just parts of training. Now, I haven't crashed my bike about 7 years now, but I know that it's going to happen again because if you spend enough time out on the road, out on your bike, you are going to hit a patch of oil. You are going to have someone pull out in front of you, cut you up. You are going to reach for your bottle to take a drink, and then find that you hit a pothole or a spot of gravel that sort of challenges you. And it will happen. You need to be prepared for this. I know these kinds of things, they really scare some people, but you need to accept. Just look, it's a numbers game. If you're going to spend tens of thousands of hours out there training on the road, if you're going to do lots of races with other people in close confines, accidents are going to happen. And you just need to accept this. We want to do everything we can to try and reduce the chances of these very unfortunate events happening to us. But these happen to the very best athletes in the world. I know some people go, if somebody picks up an injury, they didn't do enough strength training. It was a problem with the coach. They should have done this. They should have done that. Well, if it was that easy, why is it that all the best athletes in the world get injured? Alistair Brownlee, he was one of the greatest athletes of all time. But he spent I'd say probably like 30% maybe of his career managing some kind of injury. I think he had a number of surgeries, had issues with his ankles, and that really held him back, especially over the longer distance, from achieving his potential. Running injuries, these things, they are just part of the sport, I'm afraid. Something which I consider to be quite unfortunate in many ways is that if you train more, you're going to get faster. And there's been a lot of focus in the last week. Sebastian Saw putting in the first sub 2 hour marathon in the world, which was of course closely followed by his competitor. I haven't got his name on hand. I put it in my email, but I can't remember it. Apologise to him. But we got 2 sub 2 hour marathons, and a lot of people have been focusing on the shoes. They have been focusing on what he ate for breakfast, all of this. But from interviews that he's given and comments that he's made, people say, what is it? How did you do it? What was different? How is it that you managed to smash through this barrier with a 19:59:30? He said, well, the biggest difference is that I was able to do more mileage. He was able to run up to 150 miles a week. He averaged about 120, but his peak week was 150 miles a week. And that just made him faster. Now, you can do too much training. We're going to get onto that in a bit. But broadly speaking, there is quite a close correlation in endurance sport between hours trained and performance. And why is this unfortunate? Well, it's because those with the privilege to be able to train for those longer hours, they've just got an immediate advantage. Now, it could be that they have the money to do so. How is it that you can have more money, give you more time to train? Well, if you have a housekeeper, if you have somebody who takes care of everything around the house for you, hopefully not your other half, hopefully you're not just dumping all of the domestic duties on your other half whilst you go and you train for your event. But if you have someone who's going to make sure that your bathroom is clean, that your clothes are laundered, that your sheets are changed, if someone is taking care of all of that, that frees up so many hours in your week that you can go out and you can get on the bike. And you know what? If you have the money to afford that, I encourage you to. That's a great idea. It will make you faster. But relative to somebody who's a single parent, they're always going to have more time. They're a single parent working a part-time job, and they seem to spend their entire life juggling things with other people. But they say, you know what? I want to do something for me. I want to do something for myself. And I'm going to take on a triathlon. I've seen plenty of single parents who have done this and managed to make it work, even if they don't have a lot of money. They are going to be at disadvantage because they have less hours to train. And this is a spectrum between, you could have somebody, trust fund kid, Their parents have agreed to fund their triathlon journey for sort of 2 to 3 years, and they're posting on Instagram all these amazing places they're going traveling. This big week of training they've put in, they've attracted these sponsors, they're doing really well. But for the vast majority of us who are having to work full time just to try and pay the rent or try to pay the mortgage, we're not going to be able to hold a candle to them. So there is this really close relationship between performance and hours trained. Now, don't get me wrong, somebody could train for 20 hours a week and they could completely fluff it. They could do all the wrong kinds of sessions. They could do really sort of poor intervals. It could be they really overtrain and they find themselves burnt out and they don't even finish their race. But for somebody who has the time to put in and train smart, okay, they are just going to have that advantage over somebody who can only train for sort of 8 or 10 hours a week. Now, I'm afraid to say that you're never going to have a perfect race. This is something we're all chasing to a greater or lesser extent. That perfect day. That day where we absolutely nail it. I think the only person who's come close to having a perfect race, actually no, even she didn't then. I was going to say Lucy Charles when she won Kona. Gun to tape, out front all day, just, made it work. But even then, she had real problems with her Achilles, and I think she was worried that she'd have to pull out and she'd have to stop running at some point. So even these performances that look dominant to us, okay, there are always issues, and especially as we start looking at the longer distances, as we start to look towards sort of 70.3 and Ironman, you're going to make so many mistakes over that race. It could be that your goggles don't go on quite correctly and they start filling up with water, so you have to either tread water for a second to readjust them, or you have to swim with one eye closed because one goggle is filling up with water. I know I've done that plenty of times myself. It could be that you really fumble your helmet in transition, or that you forget something, your nutrition comes off of your bike, you forget to eat something, you fumble a bottle at the aid station. There are so many things that can go wrong in a day that we need to accept that having that perfect build-up in training, that perfect race, is just not going to happen. And we are going to be troubleshooting, we're going to be firefighting in some cases. And one of the biggest sort of issues that we face as triathletes is over, especially the Ironman, is that our performance can be dictated by our stomach. And realistically, our performance should be dictated by our legs, by our lungs. We want to be on our limit physically, pushing as hard as we can. But quite often we'll be battling diarrhea, we'll be battling nausea, stomach cramps. There'll be all of these issues that we're going to be grappling with on race day. Partly, sometimes it can be because we didn't have much of a nutrition strategy coming into the race. We ate too much, we didn't eat enough, we ate the wrong things in the wrong the wrong times. We had the wrong concentration of drink mix. But sometimes you can follow all the strategy that you had in training, but sometimes it just lets you down. I had that Ironman 70.3 Staffordshire. I ate the same things I normally did, but I found myself just feeling a bit weird coming off the bike, and I think I spent 10 minutes in Portaloo at the start of the run just trying to get myself back to square one. And it is incredibly frustrating when it happens, and it happens to the very best athletes. You'll see a number of them, they'll pull to the side of the road clutching their stomach with cramps, or you find them at aid stations taking the time to really eat, drink, pop into the toilets. It is a wild card, and unfortunately there's nothing that we can do to completely eliminate the risk of this. There's a lot we can do in training, practicing our fueling, getting used to the products that are going to be available on race day or that we're going to use on race day, having food in our special needs bags, savoury items if we need them. But at the end of the day, the hard truth is that sometimes your race performance is going to be limited by your stomach far more than it is your legs. As triathletes, we are going to train and we're going to train and we're going to get faster and we're going to get faster. And this is brilliant. This really is, it's a fantastic feeling to feel yourself get faster after every single race. Setting new PBs. And even if it's not after every race, over the years, you can see yourself slowly improve. But there's going to come a point where we reach our peak. Now, how and when you reach that peak is going to depend massively on when it is that you start. So, if somebody starts triathlon, well, if they start sort of swimming and running when they're sort of 6 or 7, okay, and they really take their triathlon seriously, they find themselves on the British Triathlon or equivalent performance pathway, they could find themselves peaking around the age of 25 or 26 when they reach that kind of that physiological peak. Now there is, I think that we tend to peak around 23 physiologically, but I do believe that elite athletes can continue to improve past this because, well, if we all had a conversation with our 23, 22-year-old selves, I think we'd all be quite annoyed by the end of it. Because at that point, we're still not developed fully. That frontal lobe hasn't quite formed, and we're just not making the best decisions. We're not self-reflecting as much on things, and as a result, we're leaving performance on the table. So I think that combination of reaching a physiological peak but also getting a bit more mature and well learned in the world of things, starting to understand things better. I think that a lot of elite athletes, it will be kind of mid to late 20s where they reach their peak. However, if somebody picks up the sport in their 50s, maybe even their 60s, they can continue to improve for some time. But there will come a point where the combination of your physiology and also your development as an athlete in general, with your skills, your techniques, your race experience, all of this, there will come a turning point, I'm afraid, where you start to get slower. And a lot of people, they'll reach this and they will go, you know what, I'm going to train really hard, just try and maintain where I am. I've given up on trying to get faster. I'm going to try and maintain the pace that I'm at so that I continue to improve within my age category. So if you are in the 70 to 75 age category and you are starting to slow down, okay, this is going to have, as everybody else is going to be slowing down with you. And if you can be the one who slows down the least, then you're going to do the best. But yeah, there will come this inflection point where you do start to get a bit slower. And that can be really hard to deal with for some people, but it's inevitable, I'm afraid. Now, a lot of people, they can do fantastic things into their 80s and their 90s. Okay, now this is a bit harder on the body. Recovery is a lot harder. You will need to include a lot more in the way of strength work, mobility, stretching to help the body do that. But to be able to keep doing what it is that you love as you get older is such a privilege, and it's something we should really aim to work towards. So when you do reach this inflection point, where you do hit this J curve and you do find yourself starting to get slower, just try not to take it to heart. Try not to think it's something that you're doing wrong. It's just physiology. It's just how the human body works. Something I and a lot of other triathletes struggle with, at least I struggled with it in the past, is that most people, they just don't care about triathlon, your training, as much as you think. Now, for us, this can be an incredibly personal journey. Many people start triathlon in memory of someone, for their mental health. That's how I started out. It could be that they are, taking on a challenge for a sort of a fundraising activity. Whatever the reason is for triathlon, most people are coming at it from quite a personal reason. And a lot of us, they go on this real journey of self-discovery, and their self-esteem really increases, and they are so proud of what it is that they achieve. They've taken on a triathlon. They may not have run before, can't really swim, not been on a bike in years, but they go and they really apply themselves, and they put all their spare time and disposable income into this journey, and they are so proud of themselves. And then when they tell people about this journey, and people just kind of like shrug or, say, oh, can you just shut up about that bike? It's all you ever seem to talk about. Someone who says that, they're clearly being a bit rude. But yeah, you expect people to have a level of kind of excitement and respect, and to be invested in what it is that you're doing. But most people, they just don't. And that can be really hard to deal with. because you are so hyped up, you're so enthusiastic about your training, and you hope that those around you will feel the same way, but they don't. And the fact is, other people have got other things going on in their lives. Some people, they're just not that impressed by these activities of these races, events, tests of endurance. It's like if somebody, we got sat chatting to someone and they start talking about their bodybuilding routine, and all the supplements they're taking, and how many reps they've done of this, and the weight that they're lifting. We kind of, yeah, all right, okay, yeah, but how fast can you run 5K, mate? It's a similar thing. There's not to say that we don't respect someone for it. We could see somebody who had a fantastic physique and go, wow, you must have spent ages in the gym and like really looked after what you're eating to look like that. It doesn't mean that you want to sit there with them chewing our ear off about protein for half an hour. So don't be disheartened if people aren't as interested as you'd like to think. Now, if you can share these photos of your medal crossing the finish line, I completed my race, I did this, I qualified for this world championship. People are impressed. Oh wow, that's great, congratulations, well done, really happy for you. They will celebrate those moments with you, but the day-to-day training, where it is that you went on your ride, how long your run was, what you did in the gym, they're just like, people just aren't that interested in that, unfortunately, and we need to accept that. Next truth I want to share is that a lot of data is actually quite worthless. And this is a real journey that I've been on as a coach, because when I started out, I really sort of prided myself on being, sort of like a data-centric coach. And this is a journey that I think a lot of triathlon coaches go on. It's all about the science and the data and this, but I realised a few things. First of all, is that unless somebody is really close to their potential, unless somebody is, you're trying to get into a certain place, you don't really need to go into the weeds with the data. It kind of goes over their head a little bit. A lot of the times, it's nice to maybe collect it and show them how they're improving over the weeks and the months and the years. But for the most part, the more important thing is how it is that somebody feels. It's okay, so how tired are you feeling? I'm not feeling tired at all. I'm really enjoying this. I'm really, I want to keep pushing. That's great. Over here, like Training Peaks suggests you should be exhausted, but if you're feeling really good, then the data just isn't quite adding up. So we need to listen to you and your body. And there are, lots of metrics out there that lots of companies like to try and push on you, whether it is that they want you to do their advanced testing protocol, whether it is that, they are trying to sell you a sensor that's going to measure your blood oxygen, or you continual glucose monitoring, or whatever it is. A lot of these are pushed on athletes who are always looking for that next level, for that next sort of level of performance, basically. And a lot of it's really not that useful. It's really not that interesting. Okay, there may be like 100 athletes on the planet who are working at a level and they're in a place where this metric may actually be useful to them. But for the vast majority of us, it's just noise. If I looking at an upgrade that people talk to me about, they go, Simon, I'm looking at power meters. Should I get a single-sided power meter or should I get a double-sided power meter? I say, well, I've worked with lots of people who've had both. But when I look at the data from the double-sided power meter, I can go, oh, look, your left leg is consistently creating 49% of power. Your right leg is close to 52%. Wow. What do we do with that information? We're measuring it, but how is it actually going to influence our training? And I can create all of these really pretty charts in WKO and other sort of bits of software that can show us how it is that, that we are using pedaling as an example. I can get a chart that will show really break down our pedaling motion. how is that going to influence my programming as a coach? I guess I could use that information to say, oh, well, let's do some single leg exercises in the gym to try and rebalance that. But it's the kind of things we should be doing anyway, because running is a single leg sport. So I need to be training single leg movements anyway. And that's just one example of that left and right pedaling. Now, again, if somebody has something closer to like 45 and 55, that's obviously something that needs a little bit more attention, but not many people can have a imbalanced pedal stroke like that without realizing. There's probably at that point, if you're looking at 5 or 10%, there's probably an issue sort of with their hips. You'll be able to see them, when they're cycling, probably some kind of musculoskeletal issue there. For the most part, it is just kind of noise. And yeah, it will be a bit more accurate if you get a dual-sided pedal system. I'm not saying don't do it, but there's a lot of this data is out there, and everybody wants to be able to show you this new metric and this new way of measuring things, this new way of testing, this advanced fitness test. But what are you actually going to do with that information? Okay, so it may mean that our FTP goes up or down by 2 or 3 watts, or it may be that we do sort of slightly longer VO2 intervals than normal, or the targets might be slightly higher. I'm not saying this is pointless, but for a lot of people, they need to focus on the basics before really getting drawn into all these advanced metrics. So when you're starting out, your running pace, your cycling power, your cadence, your swim pace, and your heart rate, it's all you really need. Don't get dragged down into the weeds of all of this data, because you will start to suffer with paralysis by analysis. And unless you can effectively read and understand that data as a fitness professional or as a very dedicated age group who's gone through and taken all these courses, okay, there's a good chance you will just tie yourself in knots. Going back to this idea, nobody knows your body better than you do. This is something you need to remind yourself constantly. Now, as a coach, I know what I consider to be best practice, such as if we are 9 to 10 months out from your race day, we need to be taking things easy, we need to be taking things steady. If we are sort of 8 to 12 weeks out from your race day, we need to be pushing really hard. And this is what I will steer people through. If somebody is saying, I've got loads of energy, I feel really fresh, and I say, oh, well, actually, well, that's good, because we should be feeling that. But no, like, really, like, it feels like I'm barely doing anything, okay? It's important you advocate that you raise that as a sort of, not a red flag, but as it feels like I'm doing zero, almost. Like, I can do a lot more and still feel completely and totally fresh. Can we try that for a week? Also, data, HRV, heart rate variability. Now, I'm not the world's biggest fan of heart rate variability, because I find, well, for a start, people who bang on about their Whoop band or their Oura ring, after about kind of 6 to 8 months, it normally ends up in a drawer somewhere with a cancelled subscription. Because there comes a point where, and it's I'm not saying don't buy them, don't try them, but for a lot of times, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you wake up and you feel really strong, but you take your heart rate variability reading and it goes, oh, you know what, you're nearly dead, like, don't even think about training. Then somebody could, okay, I guess I guess I am really tired and I should take a day off, where they actually could have done their workout no problems at all. Or you can have, and suddenly go, oh, you know what, you're super fresh, you're really gonna enjoy training today, focus on these training systems, try to develop your power or your lactate threshold, when somebody actually feels really run down and flat. Now, that can be a bit of a boost in that way. It can cause someone to go, actually, you know what, no, I am going to do this session. Instead of like skipping it or making it an easy session, I'm going to push through, and I'm going to do these sweet spot intervals. Because, that's, it's telling me that, I'm green and I should be fine to do them. And it may help you do a session that you hadn't done previously. But I find that I think they're helpful, these heart rate availability devices, these wearables for helping you understand your body, helping you understand what fatigue feels like relative to laziness. But they do become self-fulfilling prophecies, and that people find their training being dictated by their HRV reading rather than what it is that they actually need to be doing or should be doing. And that as an athlete, you know your body better than your coach. You know your athlete better than your HRV reading. And there needs to be some give and take there, especially with the coach. There needs to be a dialogue. If you fly somewhere and your coach says, "Oh, you know, we really need to avoid doing anything, but to allow our sort of circadian rhythm and that to readjust after the time zones and that," but you go, "Actually, I just feel really good. I just want to go for half an hour run." Then it's important to push back, because that may actually be what it is that you really needed. Okay, as coaches, we can make the best guess based on your previous history as an athlete, what we've done with athletes in the past, but especially if only recently started working with someone, we don't know how it is that you respond to things. You do need to push back. You do need to say, "Hey, no, you know what? Like, I am going to do this." You know, at least like engage in dialogue rather than just go out and do it on your own. But do need to sort of push back and, you know what, like, I'm telling you I'm exhausted, or I'm telling you, like, I feel really good, and we need to adapt things based on that. Something else we have to keep in mind is that exercise addiction is very real and it's very dangerous. Now, a lot of people, they can find themselves in this place of exercise addiction. Now, triathlon, I think, given the high number of hours that we spend, especially Ironman, the high number of hours that we spend each week training, and the fact that more training will probably make you faster in most cases, as we touched on earlier. This can get people to the point where they really feel they have this compulsive nature, and they need to do their session. They get really grumpy if they don't. Now, this is a sliding scale. I think that all of us, if we go for a period without training, if we're used to training, we can find ourselves being a bit grumpy, a bit out of sorts, because we want to move our body, we want to get out there, we don't just want to sit around all day. But when people start to get really obsessive over this, this is a problem. Now, I'm not going to go into this one in too much detail, because it's not something I'm an expert on. But what I'm going to say is, if you do feel that you are heading down this path of sort of exercise addiction, where you feel it's not so much a choice as something you need to do every day for several hours, you need to reach out. You need to find someone to chat to. It could be your GP, a sports psychologist, but don't ignore the warning signs, especially if your body is starting sort of to push back, to rebel on you a little bit. But you feel that you can't stop. Okay, find someone and have a chat with them about it. The other hard truth that a lot of people aren't going to like is that AI just isn't ready to help people with human performance at the level that they think it is. Now, for some people, if somebody is working at a very basic level, that may be what they need. But what people think, people sort of move towards AI for the customization aspect, for the self-adjusting plan, but it's rubbish. I've tried it myself. I went into it with an open mind. It felt way, way below my expectations. I really thought it could be something helpful, useful. It wasn't. If you look at all the reviews, all the analysis that people have done, they can see what they're trying to do, but it's not only relatively expensive, compared to sort of a plan, it also doesn't adjust to you as an athlete or your training and missed sessions nearly as well as you think it would. And that the gold standard is always going to be coaching. I don't think there's anyone out there who is seriously trying to argue that AI replaces a coach. But when you look at AI relative to a training plan, I still think that, as things are at the moment, that a regular off the peg training plan, like the ones that I write, that have all of the supporting materials that talk you through injury, fatigue, how to move sessions around, how to adapt your training, something that really helps educate someone to make their own decisions, as opposed to just sort of following this plan that's been cobbled together. I do think that is still the way to go. Now, some of you may say, oh, well, you would say something like that, Simon, because you're selling training plans. But if I really felt that AI was the way to go, I would be investing and working with these AI coaching platforms. But I really don't think they're the way to go. And it is an inconvenient truth for people who are really excited and people who are really they've really bought into this world of AI. But all of the platforms I've looked at, I've looked into reviews, and there is a bit of confirmation bias going on there, I guess. But yeah, they're just the ones that I've tried, the ones that I've looked at, they're just no good. Now, in time, they're probably going to get better. However, the way that AI is going at the moment, where you look at the huge, I think OpenAI is losing millions of dollars per day. This level of investment, it just isn't sustainable, and there's going to come a point where they're going to need to really whack their prices up, and everybody who's using their systems are also going to have to increase their prices based on that. And AI is going to go from being, this sort of more expensive than an off-the-shelf training plan, or more expensive than coaching in some cases, and it's going to become astronomically expensive because all of these that are relying on these data sets out there to crunch these numbers, the data centers and all of that. It's just the price is going to increase, and it's going to become really quite unaffordable for most people, I think, especially considering the quality of training that people get. So my recommendation would be to keep learning, read books, educate yourself about the sport, listen to your body, make your own choices, follow a plan or hire a coach if you want to, but don't just ask AI, oh, write me this training plan, and then go and follow that blindly. Next up, I'm going to move on to the hidden truths in triathlon. Now, these are the positives of triathlon training that not enough people talk about. It's all about the medal selfie. It's all about the bike. It's all about this sort of very glitzy, showy off world on Instagram of everybody sharing their results. And I'm definitely not trying to tell somebody not to be proud of what it is that they've achieved by any means. We should all be very, very pleased with any finish, any PBs, all that we achieve as triathletes. But I do think that the advantages of being a triathlete, they do go beyond these finish line moments. So I'm going to cover some of those now. Now, not many of us get into triathlon for health reasons. There are going to be some of us, but the majority of us, we're drawn in by the promise of races and glory and this self-fulfillment. But the fact is that triathletes, endurance athletes in generally, have a significantly better life expectancy and improved mental health relative to the general population. Now, this isn't to say that it can't swing the other way. If somebody does too much exercise, and we are really talking about those who are trained at the highest level for Ironman and but you can increase your risk of certain heart conditions. I'm not going to list them because I don't know enough about it. But I've certainly read plenty of convincing pieces talking about you can have the increased risk of certain cardiac issues if you are putting your heart under a huge amount of strain for several hours a week. And that's not to say that triathletes are immune to any kind of depression or anxiety, but relative to the general population, we are a lot healthier in this regard. It's from moving our body. It's from, feeling like we're achieving things each day. We have a purpose. I think that's something that we take for granted as triathletes, is that we have a reason to get up, to work towards this race, to try and get better, to get faster, to get stronger. When there are, hundreds of millions of people around the world who wake up each day, they just go to work. They're just surviving, trying to find answers at the bottom of a bottle. And that we as triathletes, we really have just this richer tapestry of life, and that's something that I don't think gets talked about enough. And being a triathlete, achieving this greatness athletically, it's going to make you more employable, it's going to make you more successful, it's going to make you more resilient. We learn an awful lot about ourselves when we are cycling up a mountain in the rain. when we are pushing ourselves to go from just swimming up and down the pool, feeling really nervous, to be out swimming in the middle of a deep lake or in a rough sea. Just that the level of self-control, the level of discipline, the level of focus, everything that we work towards to be able to achieve, the even a sprint triathlon finish, the purpose, the dedication. These are the kind of traits that employers really look for. People who can adapt, people who, they don't find themselves overwhelmed easily. Now, I'm not saying that, next time you go for a job interview, you need to start waxing lyrical about you've done this race, you've done that. It comes from a quiet confidence. It comes from an ability to take things on the chin, to roll with the punches, to be able to really apply yourself to things, to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And these are habits which I think a lot of us, we've lost, especially in the last 100 years as life has become more comfortable, more predictable, which I think, it is a good thing in many ways. You want that level of comfort and predictability. We don't want to constantly be feeling stressed and like we are, close to sort of to losing, our family or our home or anything like that. But I think some people definitely get too comfortable, and as triathletes, we push ourselves harder, and we achieve this greatness in all walks of life, and that definitely plays through into other areas, into the workplace, into business, sort of even relationships. That I believe. So this is something that I think we can't afford to lose sight of, and it's another reason, that we should sort of keep in the sport. And with triathlon, there's always something else to train for. There is always another challenge. There's always another race. Unless you're going to every race and you're winning every race, there's always ways to improve. There's always something else you can do, somewhere else to travel, something else to work on in your training. It is such a rich tapestry. There is so much that you can be doing with your time. There is so much, so many places you can go. That the world really is your oyster. There are all these events that you can attend. Mix up your calendar. Do different distances, different kinds of events, different kinds of triathlons. Even look into duathlons, aquathlons. Try and qualify for the world championships. Unless you're winning the world championships in your age group, there's more work you can be doing. So, I think this is, something that it's worth remembering, even when you do find yourself sort of lacking that motivation or that drive. It's just go, well, why don't I mix things up a bit? Why don't I try a race that I've never been to before? If you've got into the habit of kind of doing the same races year after year, of trying go sort of somewhere else on your weekend ride, even mixing things up. There's so much variety out there. There's so much that we can do as triathletes. And it's just one of the many reasons I absolutely love this sport to bits. So those are my harsh truths and my hidden truths of triathlon. Now, I hope these didn't come across as being too negative. It's definitely not what I'm going for. It's just to help people understand what the sport's really about, what really happens when you're training for an event. It's not about glossing over these details and making it all really sponsor friendly and talking about how wonderful everything is. It's a chat about what training is really like, what triathlon is really like, the pros and the cons, the things that you just have to accept are going to happen. Thank you for your company. I do appreciate it. I'm going to wish you the very best of luck with your training, and I'll see you all next Tuesday morning.